Okay, I could see Sandy and students are joining the class. So, okay, first, before we go to this literary movement to discuss about the literary movement of Assam, I would quickly sum up about this tattoo culture because this is one aspect on which Sandy is going to write a story. Sandy is from Arunachal Pradesh, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
When we are talking about this tattoo culture, this is very interesting to know about this tattoo culture. This is something which is very traditional. Now we also see that you have got this modern version of this tattoo culture, which can be relatable with the film stars or even you see this music stars, like. At the same time. You see this when you say tattoo. Tattoo is something which actually reflect the history, past history of one particular community. And it can be related to spirituality. It is also related to gender differentiation. It is related to, you see, identity, group identity of one particular community. It is related to this collective identity of one particular community, and it is also related to prestige, it is related to privileges, it is related to social status, as well as the spirituality. So it has got multi-purpose. If we look at this tattoo culture, it is a kind of culture which is very traditional among the tribal communities, but this culture, this art culture has been dying down nowadays. So we do not have this tattoo culture that prominent in many tribal communities, but we are still left with a few tribal communities which are who are still working on this tattoo culture, and that will give us a very unconventional source of, you say, knowledge about their past. Okay, and as we see that it reflects, it represents the group identity, that collective identity. At the same time, this tattoo culture also represent the gender differentiations, as we see that there are different kind of tattoos for male and female. And for female, I have seen that tattoo is usually related to a social custom. For them, it is a social custom, and for male, it is related to head hunting. And there are also, you see, some uh, remarkable identity marker with this tattoo. Like tattoo is also related to the attainment of puberty. It is also related to eligibility of marriage. It is also related to, you see, one's eligibility to take part in polity on, and you see this in order to serve the chief of that community. And also it is related to, you see, this wrestler, and that's what warrior, so which is again associated with this male folk. So female dimension which is attached to this tattoo impression is completely different. So if we look at tattoo impression from female perspective is different, and tattoo impression from male perspective is also different. So you have uh, different varieties of aspect. You have varieties of aspect. Now you need to work on one particular aspect on this tattoo culture. So that is up to you. You can also work on this, you see, this called pattern of tattoo, the size of tattoo, and the color which is used in tattoo by tribal communities. So there are communities like, you see, Avor, then Singpo community also, they usually do this tattooing. And I think they do the tattooing in the lower part. And also the part of the bodies which is involved in tattooing, which is quite important. So many a time you see tattoo impression is sketch on the face, and this is called ok. in Nagaland, I guess. This is a kind of impressions, ock impressions, and also there are different body parts tattoo impression. It is put on the soldiers, it is also put on thighs, it is put on waist, and there are different patterns of tattoo impressions. As we have these impressions of, you see this lines and spots, and also there are some shapes like diamond shapes and also egg-shaped tattoos. That may be one dimension of tattoo culture. So there are different aspects of studying this tattoo culture, because it is a kind of, you see, text on skin. It is a text on skin. So you can actually study the history of one community by studying this tattoo culture. But it is a dying art now. So, because why it is a dying art? Because it involves a lot of risk and that pain while doing this tattoo. At the same time, there is also possibility of contacting infections. You know how tattoo is being, you see, uh, is being sketched, or the time when you see the skin, and there are two layers of the skin. Uh, like we have that epidermis and dermis, the first layer and the second layer. So when you talk about um, this epidermis, the first layer, which is first, pricked through the very sharp implement, like a thorn, and then you see blood oozes out, and then this you see. Then you see as substrate is actually smeared, and also at times it's swell. And what happens, I have noticed that in tribal communities, they are severely engaged with this tattoo culture. No, and they usually intoxicated themselves prior to this tattooing. So prior to tattooing, they intoxicated themselves, and after they do with this tattoo, they also you see lie uh, on the, you see, dust, and you see blood for 3 4 days, and it takes more than 25 days to get healed. So it is a very painstaking process and painful process, and it has to be taken care of um, with by using lot of medicine. Say there are medicinal plant which is also used, like one medicinal plant which is used, I know, that is called fatita. Fatita is usually smeared in order to get the wound of tattoo healed. And there are also different implements, that is sharp implement, which is used in tribal communities, like that claws, then beak is used, that is barge beak, and claws, and this animal's bone, and also that bamboo and canned silk is also used, that is soft silk that is used to prick the skin. So it is a kind of design which is uh, that is drawn on the, you see, the outermost layer of the skins, and gradually it goes to innermost, that from epidermis to dermis it goes, and through inking, and with the help of this very soft device. So you see, and there are also different, you say, definition of tattoo, and this is quite unique tribal culture. And you see, there are also Tahitian, like a version of tattoo, and Polynesian version of tattoo. And Polynesian version means to strike, and also to create a mark according to Tahitian version. So it is a very unique culture which is dying. It's a dying art, but it is very, very important to understand this culture in order to know the history of one particular community, in order to, and you see, in order to know the past of one particular community. Even it is also associated to their lifestyle, and most of the time you also see this is related to, you see, uh, darkening of face, and when you look at the dimension of, you see, tattoo, and from male perspective, because male are also associated with this tattoo culture, no? They also break their skin at times. And you see, if you look at from male perspective, you see it is related to distorting their face at times, or also darkening their face. And it is related to that bravery and the silvery, it is the expression of that bravery. uh, and this is associated with the head hunting. And again, for women, it is a social custom, so they are supposed to do it. And it is related to spirituality at the same time. That is another dimension. When we say spirituality, spirituality means this is a kind of impression on the skin, which is given by this god. And if you don't wear that impression, then God might disown you. So that the kind of impression which is there among the tribal communities regarding this tattoo culture. So it is quite interesting, and it is important to focus on which aspect you would highlight on this tattoo culture. So this is uh, that is, you see, one aspect of our today's discussion. And apart from this, I'm also going to discuss about this literary traditions and literary history in Assam, history of Assamese literature. And here I'm going to read out some name, as I have already told you that I did not put it in PowerPoint. I have simply collected it. So I'm going to read out the name. I'm going to read out name of the you see, journal, as well as the book, and those volume of poetry, and also these magazines, which are which are developed during different period of time, and which has been a part of the literary movement of Assam, uh, and the name of the authors. Okay, so which is important. It is difficult to remember the name, and I could also able to collect a few uh, writers who actually worked on ecology, the concept of ecology. As I have already told you, it is the ecology that has um, and binding effect in the sense that it has bound the multi-ethnic communities of Northeast into a single whole, into a single thread. And hence that ecology is very, very important, and hence we are also giving emphasis on ecology and nature. Even this tattoo concept is also related to, you say, related to nature. So when you're talking about this dye is made out of this root, made out of this sprout, then sugar cane, then you see these flowers and leaves. So they are very much close to the nature. So whatever is being used in tattoo is close to the nature, and something very primitive at the same time, something which is very unique to this tribal culture. Uh, then we see, when you're talking about this ecology, um, ecology is another aspect we have been discussing in last two lectures regarding ecology and environment. And in one lectures we have discussed about developmental aspect of ecology, and in another lecture we have developed our concern regarding the social action, and also people's effort to save and protect this ecology, as well as I also addressed your queries, right? So when we are talking about the ecology, okay, as I have told you, Northeast is the home to more than 225 tribes of more than 635 tribes or tribal communities across the country. And as I have told you, that often the Northeast has been misconstrued, right? It is also misconstrued, it is misunderstood, because of the diversity and because of the differentiations. You see that diversity and differentiation is there, and that is the unique features. It is one of the unique features of the communities inhabited the Northeast. And you also see that there are different cultures, and one culture of one community is different from the another culture and another tradition. And hence we see that uh, this the accurate understanding of this culture and the accurate depiction of culture is quite important. Okay, and hence you also need to read some of the a good book, anthologies, diary, journal, which will give you understanding about the ecological development in Northeast, as well as about this about different aspect of Northeast, and help you to you see gain some knowledge. So when we are talking about the writers, as I have told you, and there are multi-ethnic writers, and their writings on this ecology, and that has actually made the diversity like to certain extent made to ignore the diversity of the Northeast, and rather we get to see that uniqueness of the atmosphere and this environment. And here we see, I'll tell you the name of those writers, and as I have already told you that I'll jot it down in the PowerPoint and share you the PowerPoint, and to the extent you could follow, you follow it. So there are some writers from Manipur, like we have Mamang Dai. Not Mamang Dai is from Arunachal Pradesh, and Umlam Tana from Arunachal Pradesh. And they also used to write about ecology in a sensible way. Then we have Robin as Gangam, R.K. Madhubir, then R.K. Bhupchana, then Kunjarani Longjam Sanu, Yemlem Iramsa, Thangzam Ibo Pisak, then Rogu Len Lesangtham, then also Arabam Ongdi Mamsobi, Sarat Sanchiang, Gambhini Devi. They have been from Manipur, been working on they have been contributing to this ecology. And also from Nagaland, Luna might tell us better. So we have that Tamsula Au, then Larimai Kiangte and El Biakliana. We have also Manalisa Sankija, Esterin Iralu. We have Nini Lungalang, then Searle Sesi, and Anulla Iyer from Nagaland. We also have, you see, Mona Jote and Sari L. Sangote from Mizoram. From Sikkim, we have Rajendra Bhandari, Guru T. Ladakhi. So they have contributed to the writings related to ecology. And from Tripura, we have Bhaskar Bowman, then Niranjan Sakma, Jugmaya Sakma, Vijay Kumar Dev Barma, and we have Narendra Dev Barma, then also Nanda Kumar Dev Barma, Kalyan Rot Chakraborty, Shopan Dasgupta. They were from Tripura, contributed to ecology. And also we have Anjum Hassan, Paul Lingdo, then Almond Dishiem, Esther Shiam, Bivin Al Sher, Indari Shiam Barjiri from Meghalaya. And from Assam, we have this Nabokanta Burwa, Nilamani Phukon, Hiren Bhattacharya, then also Hare Krishna Deka, and we have Bhupati Das, Lokhohira Das, Dayananda Pathak, Rupanjali Borua, Umakanta Sarma, Mitra Phukon, Sanjay Hajorika, Dhruva Hajorika, Upa Putamia Kodita. They have been contributing to the literary development, and their contribution is very specific to ecology at times that we noticed. So when we are talking about ecology, So our knowledge is usually very limited, uh, as we cannot deal with each and every aspect in simply one or two classes, right? But you see, um, um, what is important here when we discuss about the literary tradition in Assam, and we discuss about those five ages of literary tradition. About two ages we have discussed in one class uh, regarding this Arunodoy age and Junaki age. Uh, and there are also other three ages which I will discuss today. And why it is important is that this will contribute to literary journalism. Now, literary journalism is a new approach to journalism, you know. So when we're talking about literary journalism, this is different from the older approach to journalism, as it gives emphasis on subjectivity. So earlier we see journalism has been giving much more emphasis on objectivity, right? So literary journalism is one approach to study journalism, not study, it is one aspect to writing a story uh, and with a subjective overtone. Okay, and here also we see that uh, uh, there are certain characteristics which actually define the literary journalism, and those characteristics are basically related to how you deal with the story. So this approach came in 1960s and 70s, and then uh, uh, it got popularized actually, and the characteristics of journalism is such that you have a scene by scene construction of the story. So the whole structure is different. So scene by scene construction of the story, instead of putting simply the historical fact. So here you first depict one scene followed by another scene, and that scene actually creates a meaning. Okay, so the technique it has adopted from you see fiction writers, but literary journalism involved in non-fiction writers, also fiction writers, but definitely it is not something related to writing fiction. Okay, so it involves dialogue also. So when we are talking about dialogue in literary journalism, the dialogue is not something inventory, or is not something imaginative. So it is not invented, it is not out of imagination, but that dialogue uh, is is uh, is derived from the community, you know, which you have studied, and derived from the institution which you have studied, derived from the person which happens to be the subject of your study. So dialogue is one element of literary journalism, apart from the you see the scene by scene construction of the story. And then we have one more element that is called the third person point of view. When we say third person point of view, that is also very important element of literary journalism, to make the readers involved to the story. So here you are supposed to do exhaustive research. You need to carry out exhaustive research in order to get acquainted with the human institution, get acquainted with the cultural group, get acquainted with any event, and also get acquainted with the lifestyle of one particular community. So you see that when you are talking about these very examples, this actually compose these very aspects compose the the literary journalism, the subject matter of literary journalism. Okay, and that's why it is quite important also to study the literature in Assam. So if you ask the importance of study the literature. This is also another part of the media in Northeast. So help you to understand the literature of one time, the milieu, socio-cultural milieu of that particular time, which is relatable to the literature of that time. At the same time, some of the socio-economic issues which also got significance during that time, which is also relatable to those development, because literature reflected those, the kind of literature which I'm going to discuss with you, reflected that socio-economic and cultural milieu, reflected that socio-economic change, transformation, and development, and it also it helps to have a clear understanding uh, about the society in general. So, literary journalism is important, and it also, you see, it is also related to journalistic responsibility, because it is not something devoid of accuracy here. So accuracy and discipline of verification is must. That is one of the very core principle of journalism, right? So when you're talking about this accuracy of facts, has to be your facts have to be accurate, right? So literary journalism also, although it is based on subjective overtone, it is not devoid of accuracy. So you need to correct your facts. You need to get your facts right while writing the story, and it involves the day-to-day, you say, day-to-day happenings of a person, day-to-day detail of or everyday detail of one particular community. So, if you are covering a community as a subject matter, so definitely it will cover the day-to-day detail of one particular community, everyday detail of the one of that community. If you are covering one person, the account of one person, then it will also cover the everyday detail of that person. As I have told you that you can also work on an event, you can work on a human institution. Human institution means pressure group, government, whatever, that will come under this literary journalism. Journalism subject matter. So they come under the subject matter. Okay, human institution may be your subject matter, event may be your subject matter. Then you say that cultural group may be your subject matter. Somebody is working on, you say, this music fest in AP, in Arunachal Pradesh, right? So that is a cultural group that might be a part of literary journalism, and it is quite prominent in Northeastern Belt, because the study which uh, a study on literature, if you have in this belt, then you get to see that somehow it is more subjective compared to the mainstream journalism. If you look at journalism by Times of India, Hindustan Times, but the objectivity, which is the one principle of journalism, is also often questionable. So it now it has got a lot of, like, is a lot of interpretation, different interpretation. So this is not the part of our study, but let me tell you that when you were talking about this literary journalism, you need to know the characteristics of this journalism, and when you do the story, then it is important to have a scene by scene construction, important to work on this dialogue, important, it is also quite important to work on everyday detail. So any aspect you can pick up, and the responsibility of the journalist towards the this subject on whom you are working is very, very important. At the same time, what is important is the voice and authority which you will have. So it focuses on voice. Literary journalism focuses on the voice, which is often unheard, which also some facts, some events which is unnoticed. Okay, and you get the everyday details. So you usually, as a journalist, you usually maintain a diary with you and record its detail. about the event. So which a journalist who write a hard news won't do, but literary journalist will do that. Okay, so it is a development after 1960s, 1970s. But when we discuss about the history of as means literature, you get to see the development of literary journalism is much. It's traced back. You can actually trace back the platform of that journalism, which has already carved out in the past. Okay, so that is one aspect, and you also see that immersiveness. This is one aspect of literary journalism. When we say immersiveness, because in literary journalism, the journalist immersed into this character, immersed into the character the of the subject which is being covered. Okay, so you immerse into the character and you develop a kind of connection with the subject. So this is one very important, you see, aspect of literary journalism, that immerse into this character, develop that connection with this, with the subject. Normally in journalism, we see that we need to cover objectively, right? So we need to put more word on impartiality. We need to put more word on objectivity. But here, in order to have the connection with the subject, you at least you actually immerse into these characters. So you write in such a way as though readers feel that they were inside the mind of the characters. So you put those characters in such a way that readers feel they were inside the minds of the characters. They could feel the emotion of the characters. They could feel the action of the characters. But these characters which you will be working in your piece of writing, let me tell you, these characters will not be imaginary character. This will be a realistic character. So you need to do exhaustive research. You need to work on this field. You need to carry out research on the field, and you need to have first-hand account of the event. So why it is exhaustive? Because you see, it is quite easier to study secondary literature and write a story based on book, based on journal, based on, you see, existing literatures like newspaper, journal, magazine, and even from website you find some sources. At times you may not do copy paste, but it is also, you see, that it is easier for us, no, to read and rewrite that story and get some idea also. Then we also put our own lens, so it is easier for us. But if you go to field, if you converse with people, and you know the minute detail of any event, minute detail of any policy, any report, so that is there in literature, literary journalism. So you study an institution, you study an event, you study a group and activities of this group. So, and it has this importance because it mirrors the society at times. It mirrors the society. It also, it reflects the socio-cultural milieu, and that is what I'm going to discuss. So this is an introduction for you, and I'm going to discuss about uh, uh, those literary eras in Assam, and I'm going to tell you the name of those writers as well as the books which they have written. Simply, I'll read those out, and I'll later on share the PowerPoint with you. Okay, so when you're talking about this literature movement in Assam, or this literary eras in Assam, we acquaint ourselves with basically five literary ages, right? So first one started with this Arunodaya age, that was Arunodaya age. Then we have the Junaki age, and then we have Ramdhenu age, Pragatibadi age, and then we have Ramdhenu age, and then at the last we have post Ramdhenu age. So these are the five classification of literary eras in Assam, and you see the kind of literature which developed during that age, it is also related to socio-cultural milieu, as I have told you. And during Orunodoy age, which was started from 18, 1846 to 1888. So that was the period, and that period is known as, you say, Orunodoy Yug or Orunodoy era. And there are also different developments, and these developments are uh, strengthen the psychology of the people, at the same time making people free from this religious dogmatism. So when you are talking about this, the developments, literary developments during this era, so we need to mention about this Arunodaya Journal, which was the product of the Christian missionaries. Right, and the Christian missionaries, they adopted the local language. They adopted the local language. They learned the local language. They published a printing press in Sibsagar, and then they printed the first literary journal, Arunodaya. And it is a monthly journal, that Arunodaya. It was also published. And you see, the Arunodaya is an assortment of moral education, assortment of geography, assortment of science, even religions, history. It also gave us some of the, you see, it gave up some of the very important and remarkable, you see, uh, contribution in terms of grammar, textbook, dictionaries, so which have been available during which were available during that time. And missionaries happened to be the torchbearer of the literary trend in Assam, and they actually they set the first footstep in literary period. So let me tell you the name of a few Assamese writers of this age. So they were Nidhiram Farewell, then Ramakanta Soudhuri, then we have Bhulanath Das, Kamalakanta Bhattacharya, Baladev Mahanta, Hamchandra Borua, Gunabiram Borua. They actually opened the door to modernism through their poet. You see, Nidhiram Farewell's poem Nistharor Upainai, then Issoror Dakham Bakhya, then we have also Narakar Bibaran, Sorgor Bibaran. These were some of the poems written by Nidhiram Farewells. Then we have Kinaram Sharma, that was another Assamese writer during Orunodoy age, contributed to literary traditions by writing this Kolikatar Hukiati. And then we have Punananda Sharma, who wrote Bibesanar Gun. Then we have Sika Das, who wrote Satsanga Korar Kotha. Then we have Ramakanta Soudhuri, who is influenced by Michael Madhusudan Datta. Michael Madhusudan Datta is a famous writer of Bengal, and he also composed a volume of verse known as Abhimanyu Bodh. And in that he came up in 1875. Then we have Baldev Mahanta. Baldev Mahanta wrote child poem that is called Ujupat, you know. Then Bhulanath Das, as I have already told you, that Assamese writer of Orunodoy age, who wrote Sita Haran, Kavyamala, and Sinta Tarangini. Okay, then Kamalakanta Bhattacharya in 1890, he also contributed to Assamese literature by his volume of verse that is called Sinta Nol. Okay, so the Arunodaya is actually made the poetry free from all these religious issues. And you see, you get to see a touch of morality, humanism. You get to see the use of simile, metaphor in this in the poem during this Arunodaya age. And at the same time, you could also see the application of very lucid, simple, and clear, very clear style, and that has actually given a very new look to the poem as well as literatures that came up during that period of time. And you see, this Arunodai is also pioneer of modernism in Assam. And as we also already came across about the number of periodicals that developed during that period of time, like Assam Vilasini is one, came up in 1871 to 73. Assam News is there, 1882 to 85. Then Assam Bondhu that came up 1885 to 86, then Assam Torah 1888 to 89, then 1890, Assam Mihir 1872 to 73, then also we have Mo that came up in 1886. So you see that it is a significant era, literary era, and if you look at the women writers during that period of time, before we move on to Junaki age, because it is important, because you see that there were different developments in the pre-colonial area, and Arunodai is also one aspect of development that has reciprocated the whole process of women emancipation. Okay, and that we talk about this transformation of that social milieu. And this patriarchy, if we look at the patriarchy, which is evolved at the same time, it is also developed as and the evolution of culture and society, economy, and these forces like Arunodai uh, and various kind of literatures have also reciprocated that change uh, of the society. Okay, so during pre-colonial period, what happened? You also know that women education was a social taboo, right? And women were not allowed to even touch the puthis or the manuscript. We call puthis, we call manuscript as puthi in Assamese, and these puthis, these manuscripts were kept in Thuasang, you know. So when you say Thuasang, Thuasang is a kind of self which is usually there in the fireplace in the kitchen areas, and puthis are kept in Thuasang in the fireplace, so that smoke from the fireplace would destroy the silver feast and the paste. And you see, puthis are something which are not supposed to be touched by women. So it is also a taboo. And education is a taboo. Women education, not education. Women education is a taboo, and women are denied to education, and also they are not allowed to touch their booties. And in that way, you say when they are kept in Dhuasang, in that way you see intrusion of that. Intrusion of male domination into the women only place, and that is the kitchen. What we get to see there in pre-colonial Assam. So kitchen happened to be the women only place, and this is the private sphere, the intrusion of that public self of male into this public private sphere or women only sphere, and that we get to see. And we also see that there is some other development, because development in terms of literatures, and these developments is culminated by the effort of those upper caste women who got this opportunity to study and also get themselves educated. Most of them studied in Kolkata. And also, they are exposed to this cultural awakening of Kolkata. And you see, there's poems and literatures, what we were talking about as a part of literary development of Assam, uh, where uh, were immersed in the metropolitan city. And for Assam at that point of time, city was Kolkata. And hence it was emerged in Kolkata. Like the world literature also centered on, you see, the metropolitan cities. You see, there's Moscow, London, and then Paris, Berlin. These were important center of literary, the emergence of literary tradition and emergence of even modernism in the literature. And hence, when we are talking about modernism in Assamese literatures, we need to discuss about these very ages, like you say, Ramdhenu ages, Junaki ages, then there's Prabhutivadi age, Samokalin age, Homokalin, the term we call Homokalin age, and then this post-Ramdhenu age. Okay, and again, this post-Ramdhenu is also further divided and classified into different stages. Okay, so you see that when you are talking about women writers during that period, pre-colonial period. So Ramdhenu, sorry, Arunodai and Junaki ages combined mm, that combined age, which the development during which actually culminated before independence, right? So pre-colonial period, we had women writers like Padma Priya. Padma Priya is the first women writer of Assam in 18th century. Okay, and you see, she was the daughter of Gopal Deo, and she stayed in Sotra, and she also, like, got exposure to educations by way of her stay in Sotra, and she uh, wrote in line with Sankardeva's Borgit. You might know about Sankardeva, who is a social reformer in Assam. So, in line with Sankardeva's Borgit, she actually wrote, and her writings were imbibed by that, you see, that spiritualism, and also, you see, this transient nature of life. And then we have Konok Lotai, who happened to be the second as Miss writer during this pre-colonial time. Also wrote on spiritual field. We have other writers, like we have Tarini Devi, Vishnu Priya Devi, Padmavati Devi, Fukon, Swarnalata Devi Borua. Then we have Dharmeshwari Devi Borua. We have Jamuneshwari Khatoniar, Nolinibala Devi. Okay, they contributed to Assamese literature during pre-colonial period. Okay, so when we are talking about Vishnu Priya Devi and Swarnalata Devi Borua, they were two very important figures because they remarried after being widowed. Because at that point of time, that widow remarriage was not the custom. So it came later on after the passing of legislations, right, and after the effort of social reformer in Bengal, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, and in Assam, like Gunabiram Burma, Anandaram Dhekial Phukan, they have been putting a lot of effort to remove all these social evil in the society. There are different kind of literature came up, and also women writers who contributed through their writing in order to eradication of various social evil. Okay, so we see this Vishnupriya Devi, who was the who was who married to Gunaviram Borua. Okay, Gunaviram Borua is a very significant person of that age, Gunaviram Borua, and she wrote a book called Niti Kotha. Niti Kotha, this is on moral education, on character building. And then we have Swarnalata Devi Borua, who married to Kirut Chandra Raisodhuri, who was the daughter. Swarnalata Devi was the daughter of Vishnupriya Devi and Gunaviram Borua. She also remarried after getting widowed. And she married to Kirut Chandra Raisodhuri. And at that point of time, you see that child marriage custom was prevailed. So they usually get married by the time they attain the age of 11 or 12, right? And thereafter, what happened that after uh, uh, 10, 12 years, even not even 10, 12 years, after 5, 6 years, as they are married to old men, it is quite prominent that they got widowed. Uh, but as widow remarriage was not there, so they had to suffer all the misery along with their children, and there are bulk of children they usually give got uh, that they gave birth. And so you see the kind of misery they most of these women they suffered. Most of the women suffered during that period of time. Okay, and then we see that we have also Kiranbala Chaudhary. Kiranbala Chaudhary was the wife of Nagendra Narayan Chaudhary, and we have Ratna Kumari Raskwa, who was the wife of Benudhar Raskwa, who contributed to Assamese literature during pre-colonial period. Then we have Kamala Devi, Bhubaneswari Devi, Rajabala Das, Usa Bhattacharya, then Charnalata Hoikia, uh, and all of them, you see, they wrote for women education. They wrote for social work, and the kind of article they wrote, it at times defied and challenges they challenge by their writing. They challenge the social norm which is prevalent in the society, which uh, which which were in favor of keeping them in the clutches of the household only. Um, then you see the first literary article in Assam was written by Sneholata Bhattacharya, and she wrote Sahitya Aru Ahomia. This is literature and Assamese. That was the first literary article written in Assamese. Okay. Then we have Rajabala Das's Sri Hikkar Babe Keya Harman. So a few lines on the women's education. That was the book written by Rajabala Das during pre-colonial period. Then also we have Hemaprabha Das's Ador Khoswali, Ideal Girl. Ador Khoswali means Ideal Girl of Hemaprabha Das. And we have Basantolata Hazarika's Potir Atmon Nirbharat. That means Soti was there, that concept was there. So Soti's independence, that was the name of the book, and came from Basantolata Hazarika. Azolitora Neuk, she was quite prominent in her work, was quite prominent in the field of child literature, and she wrote Nari Jagaran and Nari Jagaran, Women Awakening and Social Reform, Nari Jagaran and Hamas Homskar, Women Awakening and Social Reform. And she translated some children's story also, like Alibaba and Dukuri Dokait, Alibaba and 40 Thieves, and then Sinbad or Hatuti Jal Jatra, Sinbad's seven voices, and also that Alauddin and that magic lamp. So these were some of the translated work Azuli Tora Neuk did during the pre-colonial time. And we also have Jamuneshwari Khatuniar. Jamuneshwari Khatuniar from non-upper class background. So she wrote the first poem in Assamese and poem book in Assamese, and that was Orun. Orun was the first Assamese poem book that came in 1990s. Okay, and see, her maiden name was Jamuneshwari Hoikia, and her storybook also came from her, and it was known as Chetna. And from Muslim minority community, we have Sasme Nurjahan Begum, who also ran a periodical called Moloya, Cool Soft Bridge. And she also wrote Bhagyar Puribartan, Change of Fortune. Then we have Gyanabala Devi, who wrote Dudinia Priti, that short-lived life. And also Aloka Patongia, who wrote Bondirjek and Bhutor Upadrap. When you say Bondirjek is something, a daughter of the bonded labor, because that custom was quite prevalent during that period of time. That Bandiveti system, that bonded labor system was quite available, and where the laborer need to give his or her labor day and night, and at times on the means of subsistence. So she wrote Bhutor Padra, where she mentioned about those miseries of women which are often go unnoticed. Okay. Then also we have Suprabha Goswami. She was Assamese critic during pre-colonial period, and Suprabha Goswami was the daughter of Sarat Chandra Goswami. Okay, she wrote Louis Tormo, The Greed of Brahmaputra, and then Ajupa Kharua Banana she wrote. Okay, so that was an eggplant she wrote. Ajupa Kharua Banana, an eggplant she wrote, and then also we have. During pre-colonial period, we have writers like Chandraprabha Hoikia, Chandraprabha Hoikia, who published her story in Devi, that published her story in Bahni, and Devi was one of her story. She published in 1918, and then Duibhagya Duhita, that means Brahmin's daughter, and that was also published in Abahon, Bahni Abahon, that came in 1922, and she also wrote a novel called Pitivita, that is a paternal homestead. She wrote the Sepoy Mutiny and Dilir Hinghapan. These are some of the stories she came up. Uh, Also, we have Malavika Devi. She wrote Adi Kobi, that Ali poet, and Sampavati, Hiku Gandhi, then Young Gandhi. So 1930, by 1930, we actually get to see a new literary tradition, and there are certain forces also that stimulated that literary tradition that I will discuss. And we have also Susibrata Rai Chaudhary, who wrote Kun Bate, which way, and then Pathor Khandhan, and that is in search of road, and then the Podor Hima is one limits of danger, that is there. And Trailukeshwari Devi also wrote Andhir Kadhu, that is story of evening. And we have Hamaprabha Das, who translated Shakespeare's story at that point of time during this pre-colonial era, and Debabala Devi, who also translated Holgar Bukul. That was a translation of Onvi Volga, and that was published in Abahon in 1940. Then we have Rajeshwari Khatunia, who translated Jawaharlal Nehru's letter to his daughter from Hindi, and that is called Sangsar Puthi. Apart from that, we have also Ratnabali Borua. Who is Ratnabali Borua? Ratnabali Borua was the daughter of Lakshminath Bisborua. Okay, she wrote on Raja Rammohan Rai, and then Lakshmi Priya Das, who wrote on Vivekananda in Bahni magazine. That was magazine. Bahni magazine was a part of Junaki Heights, and then Ajoli Tora Naug. Ajoli Tora Naug, as I have already mentioned, she has contributed in children's stories. Various children's stories she came up, and she also wrote on Anandaram Thekial Phukon and Gunaviram Burwa, and she won Assam, that's what Assam Height to Hava Award. That's this prestigious award for the contribution in the literary field. Okay, then we have Nolini Baladevi. Nolini Baladevi, she also came up with the first, autobiography, Erioha Dimbo. The Bygone Days came up in 1976, and there is also a story of Nolini Baladevi. As I have already told you, that education was not something meant for women, and it is already in the sole preserve of male. Education is the sole preserve of male, and Nolini Bala Devi was blessed enough to uh, um, get education, and it's because of her grandfather, and grandfather was quite fond of her, and he also kept a table uh, for her to study in his office corner, and where she could study. And also, he took her to the marriage ceremony of last Ahom Skian, and where he actually saw, when Nalini Bala Devi, she mentioned in this autobiography, that she saw how Ahom princess and um, this bride wear a very long, you see, jewelry up to the waist that is called Gajra Muktar Hatkori, and her grandfather also gifted her that Gajra Muktar Hatkori. But when she got married, when Nalini Bala Devi got married, she was only given a Pasori Mukta, and that Hatkori was divided among her four brothers. So that was a part of this, you see, patriarchal system. So it was too very entrenched in the society, and that has been reflected in these literary traditions. It is also reflected in Nolini Baladevi's work, you see. Uh, and her novel, not only in Nolini Devi's work, if you look at the women writers, they defied women writers during the pre-colonial and post-colonial period. They defied the patriarchal system, they defied the social norm, and they also stood in favor of self-reliance, women education, and also pledge for inclusion of women in the social sphere. Okay, so Ratnavali Borwa was the daughter of Lakshmana Beshbur. I have already mentioned. She wrote on Raja Rammohan Roy. Okay, regarding, and again we were discussing about Nolini Bala Devi, right? So that was one incident she mentioned in the autobiography she wrote that published in 1976, and this was um, and this was Area Hadinbur, that is the bygone days. And there also she mentioned about her marriage. When she attained the age of 11, she got married to Jiveshwar Sankakoti. And in her marriage, her teacher gifted her uh, a hand fan along with a sandalwood hand fan, along with a white handkerchief that symbolized the purity of women, and also gave her, along with a putti, that is called, along with a manuscript. Putti means manuscript, along with a manuscript that is called Vibah Mangal, and also gave her blessing that you become the epitome of goodness in husband family, as you have been in your father's home. So that was the blessing. She also replicated it, and this women are associated with this epitome of goodness and virtue. And that white handkerchief actually symbolizes that virtue of women, And so it is interesting, if you go through this autobiography, you get to find some character which is quite relatable. And also, you see that once she got widowed, so she got married early, and after 10 years, she got widowed. By the time she attained the age of 21, she got widowed, and she was also brought back by her father to her home. And her grandmother asked her not to wear the white attire, but her father said that since childhood he has seen Nolini Bala wearing colorful dresses, but now her father's wishes will be fulfilled if he were to see her in a white dress. And this is he also meant Sanskrit word, and that I forgot this Sanskrit word. Um, In that way, diplomatically, he also maintained this patriarchal order. And she said that that worked as a Mahamantra for her. And she also, as he gifted her Bhagavad Gita, she devoted herself in writing, reading, and uh, uh, in this literary field. And it is because of her father she could actually contribute to this to Assamese literature uh, as per her account in this autobiography. Okay, and she also mentioned about the custom during this Holi in Assam, during the Durga Puja, that was also celebrated in Assam during this pre-colonial period. Durga Puja that runs for this 4 days, and for the first 3 days, that Saptami, Ostami, Navami, women are kept separately. And even in meeting also, there are separate provinces for men and women. There are separate domain where they usually sit, and there is usually an enclosure built, uh, um, and that is made of bamboo or can, in order to uh, create a division between male and female in its meeting, in its sabha. And even the similar kind of enclosure were seen in during festival time also, as you could see. Um, During Saptami, Astami, Navami, she experienced that kind of enclosure, and that enclosure is removed on Dasami, and this is removed and replaced by a net sort of, through which they could actually see the immersion of goddess Durga. And at night they are allowed to walk barefoot in open field. And she said that, she revealed that that was a kind of happiness and pleasure that she along with other women had, in order to move and roam in the open place, okay, at that point of time. So that was the time they can move in the open place. So it is mentioned in the autobiography, and it's quite interesting also, the kind of descriptions they gave regarding the socio-economic milieu of that time. Um, and she contributed to these literary traditions by the work like Smriti Tirtha is one that came in 1948. Then a short story, there are many short stories, like Ses Puja is one. One is Mirabai, then Parizator Obhisek, Prahlad. Uh, Other poems are Hanidhar Hur, that came in 1928, Hapunar Hur came in 1943, Parakhmoni, Jugadevata, Jagriti, Janambhumi, Muktidut, Mahamanav, Antim Hur, Hamoinai, Olokananda are some of the poems that Nolini Bala Devi contributed. Then we have Kunjalata Devi, sorry. Kunjalata Devi, sorry, not, yeah, Devi. Kunjalata Devi wrote the first biography on women, and that was known as Rani Durgavati. So first biography on women was written by Kunjalata Devi, and that was Rani Durgavati. Okay. Okay. Then okay, regarding other developments of women writers, the after independence or post-colonial period, before we go to the contribution of uh, women writers in the literary traditions, we'll go back to Junaki age. So we will be discussing about this Arunodaya age and contribution of writers in during the Arunodaya age, as well as women writers in the pre-colonial age, right? And now you see. Okay, now After Arunodoy age, we have Junaki age. Junaki age started from it started from 1889 and it lasts till 1940. And that is a remarkable age, as I have told you that this end of 19th century and also beginning of 20th century has witnessed development, witnessed development of certain factors and forces which which has stimulated this literary tradition, and that also got reflected in Junaki A's. And we have Ohomia Bhashar Unnoti Hadini Sabha that came up in 1888, just after 1 year of the formation of Ohomia Bhashar Unnoti Hadini Sabha. We have that Junaki magazine got published, and you see all total 91 edition got published, out of which 69 editions published from Kolkata and 22 editions published from Guwahati. And 69 editions published during 1888 to 1899, and 22 editions published from Guwahati during 1901 to 1903. And the persons or writers, authors who were contributed during this Junaki era and Junaki age, it is also known as Romantic age. Chandrakumar Agarwala is one. Then we have Laxminath Bajborwa, and we have Hamchandra Borwa. So Chandrakumar Agarwala, Hamchandra Borwa, and Laxminath Hamchandra Goswami, and sorry, not Hamchandra Borwa. We have Hamborwa. Hamchandra Borwa is also there. That came in Pragatibadi era. So and these three writers, Chandrakumar Agarwala, Hamchandra Goswami, Laxminath Bajborwa, and their contribution in during this Romantic age was very concrete, and they were known as Trimurti. They were known as Trimurti. And you see, there are also other writers like Konoklal Borua, Ramakanta Borkotoki, Satyendranath Borua, and poets and writers and authors during that period of Junaki age were inspired by Bengali writers like Michael Madhusudan Dutta, then Hamchandra Bandyopadhyay, Rabindranath Tagore, and also they are quite inspired by the romanticism in the Western world. And this romantic era was started in the Western world and Western literature. In fact, Western literature, this romantic era in Western literature started much ahead of this romantic era that we experience in Assamese literature. So in Western literature, this romantic era started from 1798 and it lasts till 1832. And we see the contribution of Wordsworth and Coleridge in terms of lyrical ballads. And Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats have already influenced the poets of Assam during this romantic age, that Junaki age. And when you say romanticism reflects in the self-love. It is also reflected in the love for nature, reflected in the love for nation and patriotism, love for the past, love for God. So it has got different aspects at times. And we see that Chandrakumar Agarwala has wrote the first romantic poem, and that is Bonpuri. And he also wrote other romantic poems like Niyor is there, Madhuris he wrote, and Tezimola. All three poems are also collected in his volume, that is called Protima. Protima is a collected volume where you get to read the poems of Chandra Kumar Agarwala. Then Kodam Kali, that was another contribution by Laxminath Bijbarua, that is a volume of verse by Laxminath Bijbarua during Junaki age. We have Priyotamar Sithi by Hamchandra Goswami, which was the first Assamese sonnet poem. And then Padmanath Gohai Borua also contributed with some immortal poems. So Padmanath Gohai Borua contributed with some immortal poems and in the form of Lila Kabya, then you say Fulor Saneki and Juroni, and we have Mofijuddin Ahmed Hajorika. Mofijuddin Ahmed Hajorika has written Gyanmalini. Then we have Raghunath Chaudhary. Raghunath Chaudhary was the poet of Bird who also contributed to this age by giving us 5 books on poet, that is Sadori, Kotoki, Duhi Kotora, Karbala, and Navamallika. And then we have Ambikagiri Raichaudhuri, who is also contributed to poetry, and his poetry has got a tinge of mysticism and revolutionary change, and his poems are like Tumi, Bina, Anubhuti, Bonduki Sondere, Dekhe Bhagavan, and Bedonar Ulka are some of his poems. And this is the immortal poems, you see. And then we also have some magazines which we need to know during magazines during this period, Chunaki age, and these magazines are like Bijuli is one. Bijuli is edited by Krishna Prasad Dwara and Padmanath Gohai Borua, and then Usa that came in 1870, that was edited by Laxminath Bijbarua. Then Alusoni that came in 1910, that was edited by Prasanna Borua and Durga Sankakoti. Then we have Ahom Bandhav that was edited by Tarakanath Chakraborty, came in 1910. Chetana that came in 1919, that was edited by Ambikagiri Raichaudhuri. Then Abahan that was edited in 1929, it was edited by Dinonath Harma. Okay, so we see that the magazines published during that age also inculcated a classification of the whole Junaki age. So based on the magazine published, Maheshwar Neuke has classified the Junaki age into 5 stages. So first is Junaki, then second is post Junaki, third one is Boni magazine, fourth one is student union, and fifth one is romantic stage. Also, you see that there were other developments, like you said, Dalini is there, Dhanbor Rotuni. These are poems written by Laxminath Bijbarua, and we have Bankuri, Bonpuri, Teji Molla, Bonpuri, Bankuri is there, Teji Molla. These were written by Chandra Kumar Agarwala, and you see the characters, the characters which they have set in this poem, that set tune in this poem, are taken from the folk tale, Assamese folk tale. So these poems are much more relatable to the Assamese society and the folk life of Assam. You see, and also you get to find the expression of heart-touching ballad through this poem, and that's what the culmination of this romanticism during this period. And also we see that we have a very famous poet book, that is Bonful, a well-known poet Jotindranath Dwara, for which he owned Sahitya Academy. Bonful was written by Jotindranath Dwara, and he also won Sahitya Academy Award in 1955. Okay, and apart from these very writers, we also had Dharmeshwari Devi, Ganesh Gogoi, Devakanta Borua, Atul Chandra Hajorika, who also set the film of Junaki era continued, and Junaki age happened to be the successful forerunner of, sorry, not forerunner, that is successful follower of Arunodoy age, and it has already made a turning point to the literary uh, the tradition, or turning point to Assamese literature. Okay, so we get to see new style, new subject matter, new treatment. Okay, and most of the time, poem of these age is inspired by Western thought, Western ideology, because of the exposure to English education. Um, and when we look at the women writer of this period, so we have. Okay, before we move on to women writers, we go to the next age. After Junaki, we have Prabhatibadi age. Okay, so Prabhatibadi Kobita, that Prabhatibadi age or Prabhatibadi era, it started from 1940. It will last till it lasted till 50. So it's started from 1941 and last till 1950, and it was inspired by this age was inspired by English and Bengali literature, and two very important Bengali literature, Kollol and Purisoy. uh, uh, this where two magazine called Lul magazine was published during 1923 to 2030, and Purichoy was published in 1937. Um, uh, these two magazines inculcated that revolutionary spirit in the country, and at the same time inspired the writers, Assamese writers of that age. And also, you see there is a shift in their intellectual tradition of Assamese writers, and Assamese writers are gradually, where during that Pragotibadi Kobita age, Assamese writers were drifted from their love for Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, and they started uh, you see, uh, Nazrul Islam, Auden, Spencer, and also Premendra Mitra. Okay, so you see, at that period of time, one significant development was the publication of Jayanti. And Jayanti has got that revolutionary overtone. It was published in 1936, but it was continued. First, it was edited by Raghunath Chaudhary, and then it was edited by Sakreshwar Bhattacharya and Kamal Narayan Dev in 1943. So there was some development that has influenced the writings of the Pragotibadi uh, period. When we say Pragotibadi period basically progressive age, you know. So Pragotibadi is an Assamese word. So where we say this Pragotibadi age means progressive age, there are certain happenings and phenomenon that influence the progressive age of Assamese literature, and those happenings are like the Second World War that culminated in 1939, right? And then we have um, you have this Quit India movement that also failed in 19 that started in 1942, and 1943 the Jayanti, that magazine with that progressive thought published, and in 1943 we also experienced Bengal famine. 1946 we see the partition of India, followed by independence of India, and then date of Mahatma Gandhi. And all these happenings had a significance in the literary tradition of Assam during this progressive age that started from 1941 to 50. And there is also a drift in intellectual traditions. Not necessarily there is a lack of absence of intellectualism that came later on. So after Pragotibadi age or Pragotibadi Jug, we have also Samakalin Jug, Ramdhenu Jug. And then and also post Ramdhenu Yug, we have got certain sea change in the literary tradition. And poem during that period of time, you see, there are Omulya Borua, then we have Bhabananda Datta, we have Dhirendra Chandra Datta, we have also Chandra Kumar Bhattacharya, we have Ham Borua, Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, Keshab Mahanta, and Ujit Borua, and they have contributed a lot in this Assamese literary traditions. Hoben Datta's Rajpot was quite important. That was the first poem of progressive thinking, and it was also inspired by Progressive Writers Association in Bengal. And then Omulya Borua, who actually made a very early date, and it is also quite significant that most of the poet they made early date like Shelley, then we have the Byron, Keats, and Omulya Borua also made an early date in Kolkata riot, and later his poems were collected and published by Nanda Talukdar in 1964. And there are some very uh, famous and prominent poet with those progressive tint, because uh, writers of this progressive period stood for socialism. They're highly inspired by Russian idealism, Russian ideology. They're also inspired, as I have already told you, that they're inspired by. Yeah, they're inspired writers during that period of time. They're inspired by Marxist ideology, Russian ideology, and they're inspired by that revolutionary, action and agitation, and they can relate more to the reality of the society, unlike the romanticism of the previous age. So romanticism. Was relatable to this imaginations and their love for nature, love for self, love for freedom also. But poet of this Pragativadi age or progressive age can relate themselves to the society more and more. They also reflect the struggle of common man in the poet. Do their their poem represent the struggle of common man? And when you talk about this Amulya Borua uh, wrote the poem like Kukur, Besha, Koila. These are very prominent poem. It is based on class struggle. And then Biplobi is one of his poem. Then Hihot Tetia Jibo is another poem. Andhar or Hahakar is another poem. Harotir Muktir Hapun is another poem. And Aji Amar Bihu is also another poem. And we have Dhiren Datta's Kath Mistri Ghar, that is another poem of progressive age, and Ojit Borua's Haturi and Tikha, another two very important poem. And then we have Sokreshwar Bhattacharya, Mathu Ekhon Note. That was a poem. He was written by his nickname, that is Debanang Priya. Debanang Priya was the nickname of Sokreshwar Bhattacharya. So you actually see that they're inspired by Marxism, and also uh, um, this is some important developments. Okay, will not go in detail about this progressive uh, age, because it is also carried forward by Ramdhenu age. So after progressive age, we have Ramdhenu age. So progressive age lasts till 1950, and Ramdhenu age started from 1951, and it also ends in 1960. So, two literary magazines were very important and prominent during the Ramdhenu age. One is Poswa. Poswa came up in 1948. It was edited by Hamborua, and another one is Ramdhenu. That was edited by Maheshwar Neuk, and that came in 1950. And then it was followed by Virendra Kumar Bhattacharya and Radhika Bhagavati. Okay, and among two magazines we have the Ramdhenu, which lasts long, and then also it inspired the new generation of writers. And we see that we have a distinct era of modernism started to with that Ramdhenu age. And Mahendra Bora is one who divided the age, not age, divided the poet of this Ramdhenu age and Ramdhenu era into two groups, a poet of common people and poet of tranquility. And another division was made by Satyendranath Sharma. Satyendranath Sharma also made a classification of the poets, like poets of Dandatmak Bhautikota. You know what is that Dandatmak Bhautikota? It means dialectical materialism. People who have a background of political science might learn about this dialectical materialism. So you see these points of dialectical materialism and points of individual freedom. And then we also had another classification of poets based on the diversity of content and the features in the poem, and those classification, and that classification is basically made like this way, like poets of individualism and poets of group thinking. And then we see when you're talking about the poets, and you see literary tradition, poets and authors and writers of Ramdhenu age and their contribution. You see the writers were influenced not only by, you see, individual freedom or individual ideology. They are also quite influenced by, you see, socialism, inspired by this Marxist ideology. And when you're talking about the Marxist ideology, you get to see the concept of class struggle in most of the poet. And in Pragativadi age, poet of Pragativadi age also not free from the inspiration of, you see, Marxism. Um, so, okay, so we have been continuing for long. Do you have anything to say in between? I'm also going to take a 5 minutes rest. So if you have any questions, so you can come up with the question. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Samarth. Yeah, Samarth, do you have a question?
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask, like, it is all very overwhelming for me to grasp it in one lecture. Will you share the share any links or resources to this, to what you have taught today? Uh, like,
Recorded one.
no, not the lecture. Like,
Oh, sure. That's what I have already told you in the beginning of my class, that I have collected the book and the authors, but I need to compile it. I need to put it in a PowerPoint, and then I'll share this PowerPoint with you.
okay, ma'am, that would be easier.
Yeah, and so that it will be easier for you also go through the name of those books and authors and anthologies. Okay, so okay. Wait a bit. I'll be back. Bye.
ये पाइपला फाइव तो हम पाइपला को बात नहीं हिंदी बोलेंगे
Reason right, it was fine.
ये पाइप को बात नहीं बोलेंगे
I got the new name.
पाइप तो एक नहीं आई बोलो एक नहीं
तेरे आपको ये इलेक्ट्रिक और हेलिको सब और ड्रिप कर ले
ये साइड हो बोलो एक दिन पहले का काय बात से निकले और लोग भेज
से रिकॉर्ड रिकॉर्ड भी हो गया नहीं हो गया कोई बात नहीं
Okay. Okay then, so we were there in Ramdhenu age, okay, and as I have already told you that the whole age Ramdhenu era was classified into okay, so the poets as well as the authors and the contributors of these age were classified into these two groups, and basically you see the someone is inspired by this individualistic thinking and another group is inspired by the socialistic thinking. So here also you get to find the importance of those political ideology, because those political ideology usually inspired the poets of this poets of all this era and inspired this literary tradition of all this era. And you also see that we have Nabokanta Borua, Nilamani Fukan, Hori Borkotoki, Ojit Bormon, Dinesh Goswami, then we have Hoben Borua, Homen Borgohain, we have Mohendra Bora, and Nirmal Prabha Bordoloi. They are inspired by individualistic ideology, and another group of poets like Ram Gogoi, Ham Borua, Virendra Kumar, Virendranath Bhattacharya, then Kehab Mohanto, Abdul Malik, you might all know, then Amalendu Guha, then Vishnu Prasad Rabha, Hiren Bhattacharya, are inspired by that group thinking, inspired by socialism and even the progressive ideology. So Ramdhenu age is followed you see has followed the progressive age, and you also get to see the inspiration of Marxism in the Ramdhenu age, in the writings of this Ramdhenu age. And both in progressive age and Ramdhenu age, what is distinct is that the social reality of common people that got reflected in the poems. So poet worked on those day-to-day struggle of the poor or of a everyday person. Uh, so that was the theme of most of the poem, and also we have seen that there are some other characteristics of the um, cult of poetry that developed during that period of time. One is the density of thinking, which we get to see in the poem in this age. One is density of thinking in the poem, and second one is we see the use of simile, metaphor, which have been there since the Arunodaya age, but it has also marked a change in the subject matter, the way it has used during the Ramdhenu age. It is different from the simile metaphor used in the Arunodaya age. You say the use of rhythm is different. So there is rhythm like 6-6-8, there's rhythm like 3-3-6, like that way. So poems were written. At the same time, what we have noticed is the importance of city center, right? So that is also one part of the development. What happened? Okay, so that is also another part of development. As you see, that the importance of city, as I have told you, that this was importance of city, as most of the modern literatures originated from the metropolitan city, and that is also true to these literatures during this Ramdhenu era, you know. And what we have also noticed is impression of Freudian ideology, you know, and they do have a different idea of love and different idea of you see the sexuality. So it is also drifted from this romantic love, and there is a tendency of sex and sexuality is also highlighted in the poetry during this Ramdhenu age. Okay, and then we see this conflict of rural-urban conflict of that uh, um, mechanical life or conflict of city, which is also revealed in the poem. So that is revealed in one of the very famous poem of Nabakant Borwa, He Aranya He Mahanagar. And we see the importance of this existentialism, which is also influenced in the poet of the Ramdhenu age. So existentialism has already declared the death of God, and that we get to see in the poem of those poet during Ramdhenu age, and those poets were highly inspired by the scientific argument and rational argument, and they're inspired by Ezra Pound, Lewis, and you also see that they are quite sympathetic to the victim of the power inequities. So they reflect a picture of that loneliness. They reflect the picture of even solitary ness and loneliness in the poem, and everything has culminated from the modern lifestyle, you know, so which is reflected in the poem. And as you see that the poets are divided into the group of individualism and group of group thinking, and as well as there are poets of Dandatmik Bhakti Kata Buddh, and that means that poet of historical materialism, or even there are also point of individual freedom. So you could relate the existence of two ideology. One is the individualistic ideology, that is liberal ideology in the poem, and existence of this Marxist ideology. So Marxist ideology is quite important at because it also said that it is not the consciousness that you see define the social being. It is the social being that defines the consciousness, and that is also reflected in the poem, you know. So and that is the core belief of dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism basically says the existence of conflict in the social force, and the importance of material need of the people. So it is also said that history of hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle, right? So it also focuses on this class struggle, existing class struggle in the society, and evolution of two classes in the society, right? From this primitive time, we have evolved to, like, you know, feudal lords and feudal lord and also serf. Then you have capitalist and proletariat, like two classes are there and contradicts to each other. These classes are contradicting each other. So there is a concept called thesis, antithesis, and also synthesis. And thesis and antithesis, you see, are into this conflict. and they establish a kind of synthesis and that commonality, and it is through the communism and socialism. First socialism, they actually overthrew the exploiting or these were oppressive system and established the uh, communism. So that is reflected in the poem and literary tradition of the progressive age and you see Ramdhenu age, and also the reality of victimhood, the oppression of the poor, which is also reflected. And you see, in post-Ramdhenu age, we see this Homokalin or post-Ramdhenu age that started from 1961, and it lasts till now. So now what we discuss about our literary tradition fall under the Samokalin and post-Ramdhenu age. And you see, it is marked by that absence of that intellectualism, which we get to see during Junaki age, intellectualism, get to see in Pragotibadi age or progressive age, and intellectualism we get to see in Ramdhenu age. So it is marked by that absence of intellectualism, and also it is marked by that absence of urban culture. So urban culture dominated the poems and literary tradition of Ramdhenu age. Urban culture also dominated some of the literary areas of Junaki age, but sorry, not Junaki age, that Pragotibadi age, but we get to see a drift from that urban culture in Samokalin and post-Ramdhenu age. And we have some of the works during Samokalin or post-Ramdhenu age, like we have Monidip, came in 1960 to 1968. It was edited by Mohendra Bora. Then we have Nabuyug, that was edited by Virendra Kumar Bacharya. Then we have Ahomia, that came in 1968 to 1970. That was edited by Chandra Prasad Soikia. Then we have Ahomia Kobita, that was edited by Robindra Bora, and Songlap in 1971, that was edited by Bhaven Bora. And we have Nodun Prithivi, that it came in 1971, and that is edited by Hiren Buhai. And then you see this Homokalin age. Homokalin age or post-Ramdhenu age is further classified into 3 stages. And this classification is made by Robindra Bora. And he also, accordingly, he has mentioned the first stage as first stage, which start from 1961 to 75. Second stage, which which has started from 1975 to 85, and from 85 onwards, we have a different kind of age, that is the third stage, not different, like similar continuation of the previous stage, but we are in the third age of Homokalin literary era, or you say post-Ramdhenu age. So you actually see that here you do not have that much of space for intellectualism, but individualism also reflected in the poem of Ramdhenu age. And in the post-Ramdhenu age also there are some interesting poet came up. I'll write the name of those poet and those minds. Okay, so we see that eminent poet of this age were Rabindra Sarkar, then Abani Chakraborty. Abani Chakraborty made it predicted. I personally knew that person, knew him. And then you see this Nolinidhar Bhattacharya, Rafiqul Hussain, and Gyan Pujari, Ram Gogoi. Then we have also Hambora, Hulin Sarma, Putul Hajorika. And we see some of the major work during that time were A. Kuolite, Sarah Salir Malita, Moni, Ghorat Asane, etc. etc. Then also we have Ram Gogoi's Matir Sapno, that's a very important poem, and Gyan Pujari's Dukhaharar Hamas. That is also one important development. So we also have Honanta Tati's Ujjwal Nokkhatrar Sandhanat, Honanta Tati and Honanta Tati and Sumit Tati, they actually worked on tea garden nurse, and actually tea garden related matter predominant in the selection of theme. So we have Samir Tati who wrote who came up with his volume of verse in Ujjwal, like Ujjwal Nokkhatrar Sandhanat is one that came up in 1981, and then A. Manohar Amal Ujjwal that came in 1985. Then we have Archana Pujari Upalabdhir Obhijan that came in 1981. Okay. And then we have Sattara Padatik that came in 1980. Okay, I'm not going to go that detail. There are more development during this period of time. So I'm going to sum up today and I will try to come up with this PowerPoint and share with you. If you have any question regarding whatever we have discussed today, so you can come up with the question. I'll deal with these questions and you better not to read out those names, and I will share this PowerPoint. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, I can address the question. Is there any question? So, Tabdi, Priya,
No, ma'am.
okay. Luna, Vinita,
Ma'am,
Sumi, Pavan, Mrinalini.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, I don't have any doubts.
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Okay then, I'm going to disperse the class for today. I'll share the lecture video, and last lecture video I could not share just because I went home, then vacation also started, and it's very difficult to upload a video from my place. So I need to come all the way to department and to upload it. So today I will upload 2 videos, okay?
Okay.
2 video live class, recorded live classes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.